Why your peace is their greatest agony. There's something you won't hear often, something quietly true, but rarely spoken aloud. The more peace you create within yourself, the more calm you cultivate in your spirit, the more grounded, still, and unbothered you become, the more uncomfortable some people will feel in your presence. It sounds strange, even unfair. Shouldn't your peace make life easier for everyone around you? Shouldn't your calm presence be a comfort? Shouldn't your ability to remain gentle in the face of pressure invite connection, not distance? Dear friend, share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update that shows you are divine one. This isn't just another video for the feed, but another piece of content to scroll you share. This was made for someone like you in mind. Someone who's tired, maybe not in body, but in spirit. Someone who needs to hear that their quiet strength matters, even when it's unseen. You'd imagine that becoming less reactive, less aggressive, and more emotionally intelligent would naturally lead to harmony. That people would admire the way you've matured. That they'd be inspired by how you respond with grace instead of rage. How you choose silence over shouting, stillness over drama, understanding over ego. But sometimes, paradoxically, the opposite happens. Your peace, instead of disarming others, threatens them. Why? Because peace, true peace, is powerful. And power, when it isn't loud or boastful, unsettles those who depend on noise and chaos to feel in control. When you stop reacting to provocation, people who thrive on conflict begin to lose their grip. When you stop explaining yourself, stop justifying your choices, stop begging to be understood, you create a silence they don't know how to fill. Your calm becomes a mirror. It reflects back everything they haven't dealt with. Their restlessness, their insecurity, their need for validation. Your presence exposes their noise. They can't hide from themselves when you're around, because your peace makes their inner war louder. And rather than face it, some will blame you for how they feel. They'll say you've changed. They'll accuse you of being too distant, too cold, or too self-important. But in truth, you've simply stopped shrinking to fit into places that demand you stay small, reactive, and broken. Peace isn't passive. It's not weakness. It's a statement. It says, I no longer hand over my emotional state to outside chaos. I choose to be rooted, even when others spin. I'm done matching energy. I'm protecting mine. And not everyone will clap for that version of you. Some people need your chaos to justify their own. Some need your anger to validate their bitterness. Some need you to spiral with them, because watching you rise feels like watching themselves fall. So don't be surprised when your peace offends. Don't be shocked when your stillness unsettles. Not everyone is ready for the kind of freedom you fought to find. But that doesn't mean you should trade it for acceptance. Because the people meant for you, those who are healing too, growing too, learning to breathe again too, they won't fear your peace. They'll recognize it. They'll rest in it. They'll protect it with you. So stand firm in your calm. Keep showing up with grace. Keep building that inner stillness brick by brick. Let it make the right people feel safe. And let it make the wrong ones uncomfortable. That's how you know it's real. Your calm shakes them to the core. Not because you've said anything cruel. Not because you've raised your voice. Not because you've attacked or condemned, but because you didn't. You didn't take the bait. You didn't engage in the drama. You didn't stoop to the level where chaos feels at home. Instead, you responded with stillness, with grounded awareness, with that kind of power that doesn't need to prove itself. And that alone That quiet strength is more threatening than any insult could ever be. Because your silence speaks volumes. Your calm presence says everything their noise tries to drown out. You are no longer performing. You are no longer reacting. And in doing so, you hold up a mirror they never asked for, a mirror they never wanted to face, a mirror that reflects not your flaws, but their own inner disorder. 1. The mirror they fear. You see, many people live in patterns of control, of blame, of emotional volatility disguised as passion or honesty. They build their sense of identity around conflict, around needing to win, around feeling superior, dominant, or victimized, depending on the moment. Their world runs on reaction. It's how they maintain control, how they feel powerful, how they deflect attention away from their own wounds. But then you come along. You, with your calm breath, your silence that doesn't seek to punish, but doesn't participate either. Your refusal to argue, to explain, to bend yourself just to ease their discomfort. And it undoes them. Because when you stop playing the role they cast you in, you disrupt their entire script, and they're left standing there, not just without your reaction, but without the excuse to keep avoiding their own reflection. That's the truth. Your peace becomes their discomfort. Your silence becomes their confrontation. Your emotional discipline becomes their unraveling. 2. The agony of inner noise. People assume peace is passive, that it's easy, that it's something quiet people just have. But peace is earned. It's forged in fire. It comes from facing your demons, not running from them. From unlearning survival patterns and choosing not to let your pain speak for you anymore. So when you reach that place, when you've chosen growth, healing, and inner clarity, you radiate something they can't quite name. And that radiance, instead of soothing them, shines a light on everything they've avoided. It makes their unhealed parts ache. It forces their suppressed emotions to surface. It reveals how loud their inner world really is. Because while peace is a sanctuary for the soul that is healed, it is a prison for the one still clinging to chaos. And so, they project, they provoke, they try to shake you, because if they can pull you back into the storm, they won't have to sit alone with the silence your presence brings. But don't fall for it. 3. Stand firm in the stillness. You don't need to react to be strong. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to explain your boundaries to validate their feelings. Let them misinterpret your calm. Let them mistake your silence for weakness. Let them wrestle with the unease your growth brings. Because the truth is, their discomfort is not your burden. Their inner chaos is not your responsibility to soothe. And their rejection of your peace only proves how badly it's needed. Hold your center. Your peace isn't the problem. It's the evidence of how far you've come. And for those still living in emotional war zones, that kind of freedom feels unbearable. But don't dim your stillness to soothe their unrest. Don't shatter your peace just to make broken people feel less broken. You didn't heal to become palatable. You healed to become free. 2. You've stepped out of their grip, and that terrifies them. Here's a truth that's hard to admit, but even harder to ignore. Not everyone wants connection. Some just want control. They don't want to love you. They want to possess you. They don't seek understanding. They crave dominance. And the way they get it isn't always obvious. It doesn't always come with shouting, slamming doors, or harsh commands. Sometimes it's more subtle, a quiet manipulation, a tone that says, "How dare you choose yourself?" An expectation that you'll shrink, apologize, over-explain, just to keep the peace. They feed off your emotional reactions. They thrive when they know they can pull your strings. Push this button, and you'll yell. Say this phrase, and you'll break. Give you the silent treatment, and you'll come crawling for closeness, even when you did nothing wrong. That's how they feel powerful. They confuse control with love. They mistake obedience for loyalty. And they call your boundaries an attack, because anything they can't dominate, they fear. But something changed in you. You began to heal. You started listening to your own voice instead of their demands. You stopped needing external validation to feel whole. You finally saw the pattern and walked away from it, one silent, strong step at a time. Now, they shout, and you stay still. They manipulate, and you stay grounded. They withdraw affection, and instead of chasing it, you pour that love back into yourself. That's not rebellion. That's liberation. You're no longer available for their games. When peace becomes your home, chaos no longer feels familiar. You don't seek drama to feel alive. You don't confuse intensity with intimacy. You don't interpret pain as proof that love is real. You're done living on that emotional roller coaster where highs are euphoric and lows are soul-crushing. You've stepped off the ride entirely. And for someone who's only ever known how to connect through conflict, that's devastating. Because now you don't respond the way you used to. You're no longer easily provoked. They can no longer predict your moves because you're no longer playing the role they wrote for you. And that unsettles them deeply. You've become unreadable to the one who used to feed off your reactions. You've become unreachable to the one who relied on your brokenness to stay in control. And worse than all of that, you've reminded them, without saying a word, that they were never actually in charge. They never owned you. They only owned the version of you who didn't know their worth yet. Peace is not passive, it's power. They can't touch. See, real peace doesn't just make you calm, it makes you untouchable. Not in a cold, distant way, but in a quietly powerful, self-respecting way. You're no longer baited into fights that aren't worth your energy. You no longer bend just to keep fragile egos intact. You no longer feel guilty. Your peace dismantles the story. They needed to tell people are storytellers by nature. They don't just experience things, they interpret them. They assign meaning. They create characters. They build entire narratives in their minds, where they are the misunderstood hero, and anyone who threatens their sense of control becomes the villain. And in their version of events, you weren't calm, you were dismissive. You weren't healing, you were arrogant. You weren't setting boundaries, you were abandoning them. You weren't protecting your peace. You were being cold, selfish, or unforgiving. Because for them, it's easier to label you than to understand you. It's easier to cast you as the problem than to examine the role they played. It's easier to cling to the illusion that they were right, and you were just difficult. But then something happened. You stopped arguing. You stopped defending yourself. You didn't try to correct their story or convince them otherwise. You simply found your center and stayed there. And in doing so, you created a kind of discomfort they weren't prepared for. You didn't behave like a villain. You didn't lash out. You didn't fall apart. You didn't seek revenge or gossip or spiral to prove a point. Instead, you remained grounded, peaceful, present, silent. And that silence, it shattered the illusion they'd worked so hard to maintain. When your calm doesn't match their fiction. See, narratives are only powerful when people believe them. And when someone builds a false story about you, whether out of pain, insecurity, or ego, they need reinforcement. They need you to react in ways that justify their version of you. If they say you're unstable, they hope you explode. If they say you're selfish, they hope you turn your back. If they say you're bitter, they hope you become unkind. That way, their story holds up. That way, they don't have to question themselves. But when you don't react that way, when you refuse to perform the role they've cast you in, their narrative begins to crack. Because how can you be the bad one when you show no hostility? How can you be arrogant when you speak with quiet humility? How can you be cold when you've simply chosen emotional clarity over chaos? Your peace disrupts the entire plot. Your stillness rewrites the ending, the agony of losing the story. And this is where the agony begins for them. Because now, it's not about you anymore. They're no longer fighting a person. They're wrestling with truth. They're left staring at a version of you they don't recognize, one they didn't account for. A version that contradicts everything they told others, everything they told themselves. And to accept that you are not who they claimed you were means they'd have to accept that maybe they were wrong. Maybe they projected. Maybe they hurt someone good and didn't want to face the shame that followed. That's a hard truth for anyone, especially someone who hasn't done the work. Because truth, when you've been hiding from it for years, doesn't arrive gently. It breaks things. It unravels what ego has spent a lifetime defending. And so, instead of admitting the narrative no longer fits, they double down. They twist the story even more. They cling to the lie. But deep down, there's a crack in the foundation now. And your peace put it there. You've outgrown their version of you. Yes, wait, here's what you must understand. When you evolve, not everyone can come with you. Not because you've rejected them, but because the new you doesn't serve the old story they've written. They knew how to relate to you when you were reactive, when you were trying to prove yourself, when you still needed them to validate your worth. But now you don't need to be understood to feel whole. You don't need to explain your boundaries to feel justified. You don't need to retaliate to feel powerful. You are simply free. And that freedom challenges everything they thought they knew, not just about you, but about themselves. Because if you were never the villain, what does that make them? And if you could heal and change and become more whole, what does it say about their refusal to do the same, stay in the light, even when it makes others uncomfortable? Let them twist the story. Let them misinterpret your silence. Let them speak from wounds you've already learned to close. You no longer need to fight for your name in someone else's narrative. You no longer owe your energy to people who only feel secure when you're beneath them. Your peace is the truth, and truth doesn't need to scream to be heard. It simply needs to be lived. So keep living it. Keep showing up with integrity. Keep building a life that speaks louder than their lies. Because in the end, the truth always rises. And no matter how loudly someone tells their version of you, the quiet power of your peace will always be the final word. 4. You were never meant to shrink, so others could breathe easier. There comes a point in your journey where you begin to realize something difficult, yet liberating. It is not your job to make others comfortable with your growth. It's not your duty to downplay your peace, to dim your light, or to pretend you're still the same broken version of yourself just so someone else doesn't feel inadequate by comparison. That weight, that guilt you feel for outgrowing dysfunction, for healing, for evolving, it doesn't belong to you. It never did. Some people become unsettled not because you've wronged them, but because your very existence now confronts everything they've chosen not to face in themselves. When peace becomes a threat, you'd think that inner calm would bring harmony into your relationships, that people would feel safer around someone who doesn't overreact, doesn't provoke, doesn't need to control. But often, paradoxically, it has the opposite effect. Because your peace doesn't just soothe, it exposes. It exposes the volatility in others. It reflects the chaos they've normalized. It highlights the inner wars they've been avoiding. And when your stillness walks into a room built on drama and emotional survival tactics, it disrupts the ecosystem. It threatens the illusions, the unspoken rules, the need to always be offended, always be the victim, always be validated in dysfunction. Your healing calls their pain into question, and instead of rising with you, some will resent you. Not openly, maybe, but subtly. They'll make you feel as though you've become too distant, too cold, too proud, when in truth, you've simply become clear. You no longer carry what doesn't belong to you. You no longer explain your boundaries to people committed to misunderstanding them. You no longer abandon yourself to preserve a false sense of peace. And that shift, that sacred realignment, rattles anyone who benefited from the older, more pliable version of you. Peace is earned, not inherited. Your calm isn't an accident. It wasn't handed to you on a quiet morning. It was forged through heartbreak that shattered your sense of safety, through confusion that stripped away everything you thought you knew, through long, lonely nights where you chose to feel it all instead of numbing yourself again. You've cried in silence. You've broken habits that once felt like home. You've unlearned generational patterns that were praised as normal. You've lost people you loved just to find yourself again. This stillness was bought with storms. So when someone tries to make you feel guilty for choosing calm over chaos, let that guilt die. Let it die with the old version of you who thought love meant fixing, pleasing, overgiving, or staying small. You are no longer available for that narrative. You are not their comfort zone. You are your own sanctuary. Here's what must be remembered. You were not born to shapeshift your soul to match the expectations of those who never cared to understand it. You are not here to shrink so others don't have to expand. You are not responsible for easing the discomfort others feel in the presence of your transformation. And while empathy matters, so